Hey, I'm Jeffrey Masters, and when Noah's Ark premiered on TV in 2005, there had really never been anything like it. It's centered around the lives of 4 black gay men, and now 20 years later, it still remains the only show to ever do that. Here's what the writer Den-Michelle Norris told me in a previous interview about what it meant to her to discover the show and also its star Darryl Stephens, who is our guest today.
Oh my God. Up until that point, I had seen so little representation of Black queer people in media that when I was much younger, I thought I couldn't be queer because that was a white person thing. Like, I literally thought that because there just wasn't any. And Noah was visibly effeminate, and he was had an active sex life. At that time in my life, I did not feel like I was desirable. Everything that I ever heard from almost any gay man that I was ever interested in was, oh, I'm not into Black guys or I'm not into femme guys. And so I really went through college without dating almost anyone, without feeling like I was desirable. It wasn't until I got into the real world that I learned that in fact I was sexy and that there were plenty of people who wanted to bone me. And so there was this character who was living kind of the life I wanted to lead and was finding love and was actively being pursued by many men at different times. It was sort of like my very first It Gets Better moment. So that is why Darryl Stephens is iconic to me.
That's Den-Michelle Norris, who I should also mention is the author of the brand new book, When the Harvest Comes, that's currently out. And now Noah's Ark is returning this month for a reunion movie that will be streaming on Paramount Plus. And to help celebrate it, I wanted to share this conversation with Darryl that I had back in 2021. We talk about the impact and ongoing legacy of the show, the radical way in which it dealt with HIV, and also we talk about becoming a brand new father. So without further ado, this is LGBT Q&A with Darryl Stephens. So I want to go back to the beginning of Noah's Ark. When you're making a show, you have no idea how it's going to be received or connect with people. When did you start to realize the impact it was having?
Well, certainly not for the first few months. It felt like the majority of what we were hearing was actually not positive. It was disappointment in the flamboyance or the femininity of the characters. It was umbrage around the just sort of fabulosity and how there wasn't enough inclusivity in terms of the spectrum from masculine to feminine of the main characters. It felt like everyone was just too far on one side.
This was before social media, so where were you seeing this feedback?
MySpace was definitely happening.
Oh.
And MySpace was kind of where the tide turned for me anyway. It was like I saw the initial responses there, and then I kind of stepped away like, okay, can't deal with that. And then I came back maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, and the response had changed dramatically. The tone had just shifted. I'm not sure what happened. I think it was actually an episode of the show. So I think by episode 3 or 4 of season 1, there was actually a conversation about Noah being sort of soft and his love interest, Wade, being a little embarrassed to bring him around his friends. And I think that conversation rang true with everyone who was watching it and taking issue with the fact that we were a little fabulous.
When it comes to the effeminacy of the character Noah, the biggest thing for me that is kind of less often acknowledged is that this is not just a one-dimensional cliche. He has friends and he's dating and he has a full life and a career he's pursuing. And to me, that is radical because we still very hardly see that, a feminine character centered.
I think that was what was beautiful about the show. I think that's what really ended up sticking with people. It was people who experienced that as well, who experienced that sort of marginalization in their own lives, feeling like they were too effeminate to be taken seriously by their family or their friends. And seeing that character be the sort of hero or the romantic lead changed the entire conversation for them. We can dress fabulous and we can be fierce and do whatever we want with our hair, whip our hair back and forth, and fall in love and have a career and have friends who support us in that. Why not? I think that's why the show ultimately resonated.
Your voice talking to you now is quite different than the one we're hearing on the show.
So I like your script. I just think you could mix it up a bit. Maybe make one of the characters gay. The cop's partner, maybe. What are you smiling about?
You always want to make it gay.
So?
So you don't need to define your work by your sexuality.
You write scripts about black folk. Are you defining your work by your raciality?
I write white characters too.
I write straight characters too. I was always taught to follow my passions. Creatively.
Did you change your voice for the character, or is that just with like time and age it's changed?
No, my voice, I actually have weird vocal issues. So like when we shot that show, I was going through something vocally where I had more control over my voice in a higher octave. So it was actually a choice to put my voice in that octave for the character, but also I had more strength vocally in that place.
So for the second season, did you still have a vocal issue, or had you got past it and had to like lift up your voice for consistency?
I had to lift up my voice for consistency. You'll see in the movie, I'm barely bothering to do it. If you do see the movie's, I think 2 or 3 years after the second season, and I'm not really, my voice is not really in that Noah register anymore.
You're talking about the reception in reading things on MySpace, but what about the more like the media-centered response? Like how was it being covered and reviewed?
Entertainment Weekly reviewed it, and I want to say that the reviewer gave it a D+ or something. It was very much like, what is this? Who is this for? Clearly it was not for him. I think that he was holding the show to some standards that were not necessarily what we were focused on at that point. I think what was really exciting about Noah's Ark at that time was that it was a low budget, guerrilla filmmaking project that got picked up by a little tiny cable network under the Viacom umbrella. And so the filmmaking that was happening, the acting that was happening was still very much from that world, but we were sort of on this platform that elevated it to a level that we hadn't quite grasped as we were making it. And I think that that's actually what's charming about it. I think that there's also this issue of, the gatekeepers of Hollywood never even allowing a story like this to be seen on TV. This would never have been, when he was first started making this, it was like Patrick understood Hollywood was not going to buy this show. There was no way that they wanted to see this. So we were making it like in his apartment, in people's, clothing shops who were friends of of Rodney's, for example, doing makeup in the back of Rodney's SUV, like that kind of thing. It was straight up guerrilla until Logo came into the picture, because HRC and Black AIDS Institute had funded this sort of pilot and these little clips, these promotional clips that we were taking around the country for these Black Gay Pride events. And Logo caught wind. And then we were on a soundstage, near the airport suddenly with a full crew. And it was like, oh, so this is actually happening now. So we're a show.
That's so interesting that because it was conceptualized just for the community, it wasn't conceptualized for like a mass appeal, that is why the show does like lean so hard into not trying to make it like, for straight people.
That's exactly it. I think that's what's beautiful about the show is that it was literally for us, about us, by us, right? It was very much a conversation amongst ourselves, and nobody else really had anything to say about it.
Well, I think that lends to something that I'm wildly impressed by with the show, which is how it handles HIV. Like one of the characters is an HIV professional, works in a clinic that he starts, and it just dispels so many myths. And I think what impresses me is just the accuracy and that there's like no stigma whatsoever about it.
Well, absolutely. And Patrick felt like if we're not dealing with this, we are doing a huge disservice to our people. And so the Black AIDS Institute was actually instrumental in his even putting the show together. They funded the first little pilot. Phil Wilson at the Black AIDS Institute was instrumental in the show even existing because they helped him put it together.
So it was like secretly like propaganda to like teach people about like...
It was education.
Education.
Yeah, absolutely. It was subversive education. How are we going to get these messages into the community in a very like light, comfortable, easy breezy way?
I think like episode 1 or 2, or one of the characters mentions like meeting someone when they were getting tested. It was so casual that I was like, oh my God, that's how we talk now.
And I think, to be honest, I think that people were talking about it then like that. I mean, people in my world were talking about it then. It just was not being reflected on TV. I think that what was happening was, sure, there were a lot of Black men who were not talking about it. But then there were those of us who were very much tapped into the HIV and AIDS activism and the outreach. We have friends who are on boards and stuff who are like, yes, of course we're having these conversations and we're getting tested every 6 months and we're doing all these things. Like, of course. So the show really reflected that world. And I think that was what was another thing that was so powerful about it. Not just the way effeminacy was embraced, But the way that HIV and AIDS were just, the conversations were normalized, the stigma was removed.
What was your relationship to HIV before the show?
I went to school in Berkeley and did theater in San Francisco. So I, in the 90s, was immersed in HIV culture. And I was getting tested every 6 months, like on the dot. It was December and June, like every year, for years and years and years. You know, I had a good girlfriend who was positive, a white woman who was positive. And it was one of those things that brought it home in a way that was sort of unexpected. There was, you know, the conversations at that time were very much about men. In the 90s, it wasn't even about necessarily black men. Y'all need to be paying more closer attention to this. It was like gay men in general. This is something that's affecting us, and we're seeing people die. And you saw the 80s in Philadelphia and all that shit. And now this white woman who I worked with sat me down at a coffee shop one day and said, so I'm HIV positive. And I was like, oh, wow. So this is circling even closer and in ways that I did not expect. And also because I was in San Francisco and the conversation there, I remember moving back to LA from the Bay Area and being like, how come nobody's talking about HIV and AIDS here? Like, where's the outreach? How come y'all, why is it radio silence about HIV and AIDS in West Hollywood? Where's the conversation? In San Francisco, I felt like they were shoving condoms into your hands when you walked into the bars. We were terrified. And when I was 22, we were wearing 3 condoms, right? Like you didn't touch anything or anybody without a condom. It was terrifying at that age.
So how much of that terror now still exists with you? Are you like completely past it? Do you think about it a little bit? Like, what's that like?
I would say because of the sort of the nature of my sexual life. Obviously, in my 20s, I was doing things, I was more interesting in terms of who I was seeing and how often I was seeing new people than I am in my 40s, right? I'm married now. So, I mean, I'm not married, but I'm partnered now. Yeah, so I'm not thinking about it now in the same way. But when I was single, you know, conversations around people who I was seeing who were undetectable were certainly happening. And I was like, okay, great. Well, thanks for letting me know. I wouldn't say I'm certainly not carrying the terror that I was carrying when I was 22 and there was no hope in sight. I would definitely say that there was a point when I was probably afraid to have sex. And then there was a point where I was no longer afraid to have sex.
That's a big change.
It's a huge change. And to think that people my age at 13, 14, we were watching or hearing about 20 and 30-year-olds dying, 20-year-olds dropping dead, 20-year-olds dying alone in hospitals. We were hearing that. And that was our immediate future. And we were thinking, that kid is barely older than me and is dying alone in a hospital room and his parents won't even come see him. That kind of shit was happening all the time. And we were seeing that shit. It was a horror show for us. Honestly, the beautiful thing about this generation and even your generation is you didn't have to see that. I mean, you can watch It's a Sin on HBO and catch a glimpse of it, but I'm sure that it's had lasting impacts on, you know, our view of ourselves, our view of what we can accomplish in terms of partners, in terms of the longevity of a relationship that we can, you know, achieve, how open we can be about our sexual desires in general, things like that.
You know, while we're talking about dating, Peter Page, who was on Queer as Folk, he played Emmett, the most like effeminate character. He tells a story about he would go to gay bars while that show's on TV, and people would just expect him to be Emmett, the effeminate guy, and it really affected dating. And I just wonder, like, did you have a similar experience where you would go out and they would expect Noah and not Darryl?
Absolutely. Noah was presumed to be a bottom, so I got a lot of very aggressive tops, very big black men coming at me like they were about to wear something out. And I was like, you don't know me like that. You know, I was very, you know, I had to put some people in their place. I just think that people were assuming that I was going to bend to their whims, and I was not. I mean, I don't talk about this very often, but it had me a little wary of going to black gay bars because I felt like I couldn't just sort of walk up to somebody and be like, hey, how are you? As opposed, and it was always a thing. I used to love going to the Catch One, Jules Catch One. And then when the show became a hit, it was like, oh, this isn't really fun anymore. This is an appearance. And I'm not meeting people. I'm greeting people. You know what I mean? Like, it's no longer a thing.
And you can't get too drunk and sloppy and just have fun.
That was it. And then when you can't get too drunk, why go out? Stay your ass at home.
Also, we have, I think, just started to have a conversation, just started to get over this talk about consent in gay bars, where like for many years, if you were in a gay bar, you were consented to like someone groping you or someone touching you. And like we wouldn't think twice.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. How are you touching people who did not give you permission? What the fuck is wrong with you? And that was normal for us.
Yeah.
People would grab my ass all the time.
Same, and it wouldn't, until like a year ago, it wouldn't faze me. And now I'm like horrified when it happens.
Yeah, I was phased. I was always like, excuse me. I even had some boyfriends try to get into fights because people were very, very bold. Hey, shoot your shot, but girl, calm down.
So if that's how people at bars expected to see Noah, how did it affect your career in terms of like the industry? Did they only expect that you could like deliver this one kind of performance also?
Well, what was interesting about the first season of Noah's Ark, that year, I shot a movie called Boy Culture and I shot a movie called Another Gay Movie. And I played very different men in those two films. And my assumption was that, okay, 2005, Darryl Stephens is coming with these three very different characters. Obviously, I'm going to have all kinds of opportunities and play all kinds of different things. And what people gravitated to was ultimately the softer Noah character. And I think ultimately that's, again, about the TV aspect. I think television characters feel more familiar and they feel more like that must be who you are. I'm seeing you every week and I'm seeing you go through all these different stories. That's got to be who you really are. There was a point when I thought, okay, if I'm not playing straight characters, my career is going to end up stalling. Like I'll just hit a point where they run out of gay characters and there's nothing left for you to do. But fortunately, that's sort of not been the case. Like I feel like with time, gay characters have become more central and normalized in television. And so I keep working.
And frequent.
Yeah.
There's just more quantity.
And even the Noah's Ark fans, every time I did something else, were like, oh, but you'll always be Noah to me. And I always want to, where's Noah going to come back? It was very much like, no, not that, this one thing that you do that I like. So I became a little bit like, okay, well, if that show never comes back, I just, it had its impact. That's not a terrible legacy to have. I'm obviously move on to something else. And quite honestly, right before I got Be Positive, the show I'm on now on CBS, I had kind of decided, I've got a daughter now. I decided, okay, I'm going to be a dad now. I'm going to do something else. If I can't do anything but remind people of the show Noah's Ark from 2005, then maybe I'll do something else.
Are you saying you had planned to like quote unquote like quit acting?
Yeah, it was going to be not my focus. Like hands off the wheel. I mean, I still write. I have a writing partner. We work every week. And I felt like, maybe behind the scenes stuff is more my thing. I don't necessarily have to be in front of the camera. As actors, I will say this. When you don't work frequently, it starts to feel like, oh, maybe I'm just not supposed to do this. Maybe I'm not as good as I think I am. And then interestingly enough, when we decided to have the kid, work picked up. The year and a half leading up to her being born, obviously we had a discussion 2 years before, right? Gay men have to plan these things, right? A year and a half before, I booked 20s, I booked Good Trouble, I was on Lovecraft Country. I was like booking things. I was like, these are shows I actually want people to watch and think people will see. Like, this is amazing. Like suddenly I'm working. Like, okay, well maybe that was a little bit of a rash decision to take your hands off. Or maybe that was exactly the right decision. Take the pressure off yourself.
I don't want to connect dots that don't exist. However, Noah's Ark touched a lot of people's lives in a time when the majority of the people in power in Hollywood were white straight men who probably didn't see this show. And so you just named Good Trouble, which has Peter Page again and Bradley Bredewig. The 20s has Lena Waithe. It's almost like the people who are watching Noah's Ark have now grown up and have power and are calling you to cast you.
Yes. I feel like those people were watching Noah's Ark as 28, 30-year-olds being like, oh my God, look what we can do. Grew up and did it and then said, hey, what are you doing? I literally felt like that was what was happening.
I mean, I think that's how Hollywood works. It's not just Darryl.
Right. But it hadn't worked like that for Darryl until 2020 or 2019. I will say that, ultimately my face is changing, right? I'm an older man now. I think Noah was this very, pretty young thing And I think that it maybe is taking a minute for Darryl to mature into a role that doesn't require the softness and the flowing hair and the Ugg boots, right? I think the other thing is that, quite honestly, I think, and we're talking that 2005, 2006, around that time, Shonda Rhimes was taking over the world. And what Shonda Rhimes helped Hollywood understand is that there can be gay characters and trans characters in a show just talking to other people. It doesn't have to be a show like Queer as Folk or Will and Grace or Noah's Ark where everyone in the show is gay. I think that there was space suddenly in Hollywood for there to be gay characters that popped up in stories that were not centering gay groups of friends. And so the shows just changed. It became like, oh, this character's got a gay brother. We're normalizing it because we're putting these shows in front of wider audiences. You don't have to be on Showtime or Logo to see these shows. You can go to channel, whatever ABC is channel 7, and see some gay people.
I'm just thinking about like Hollywood likes to tell the story that only Black gay men watch shows with Black gay men in it, and vice versa. When we have the Crazy Rich Asians, which many people love that movie. My Big Fat Greek Wedding, I think about all the time. More than just Greek people love that movie and saw themselves in it. I don't need to see a white Jewish gay man on screen to connect with the story and enjoy it. And I don't hear Hollywood echoing that.
I think as a gay man, you can see yourself in a character that's not necessarily reflecting you, because we have learned our entire lives. We were trained our entire lives. White straight men have not been. So if they don't see themselves, literally themselves, Chris Pratt, looking back at them from the screen, they're like, I don't get it. I can't watch it. It's not me.
Oh, they go to one of the other 9 options they have.
Yeah, that's where we are. And I think it's where we'll continue to be until, Lena and Justin
Simeon, yes.
And all these other folks take over Hollywood. It's time to make space.
Before I let you go, I've learned a lot talking to you, but also one of the things I learned is that you are a father. I did not know that.
Oh, did we not discuss that when I was saying that I have some things going on? Let's postpone this interview until I have a minute to breathe. Yeah, she'll be 11 months in 2 days, so she's almost a year old.
Oh, you're a new dad.
I'm a new dad. So that decision to sort of take the hands off the wheels was 2019. That was recently.
I mean, now, on the show, you're almost no longer Noah. You're a Chance.
Yeah. I mean, by the reunion, Noah is having a baby. But yeah, I'm Chance. I'm basically Chance. Yeah, I'm daddy.
So you're 11 months, you've been a father. What has been the biggest surprise of fatherhood?
The patience that I have for this child who will sometimes throw a fit or not want to be lay back on her changing table or knock the spoon of food out of my hand because she wants to watch Baby Einstein instead. The things where I would think a younger me, a less mature me would want to go off on somebody. I just look at her and go, oh, okay, that's the best you can do right now. That's okay. We'll do better next time. It's a bottomless well of love that I don't know that you look. I love her Baba. I love the man I'm involved with, but it's a different kind of love. There's a conversation that we're having, me and him, right? There's a negotiation all the time about what this relationship is about. With me and her, there's no negotiation. I'm here for you always, for the rest of your life, the rest of my life, because I'll drop dead by the time you get to college. But that's the relationship, and it's such a beautiful thing to find in yourself and myself.
I think that's a amazing place to leave it. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Jeff.
And that is Darryl Stephens. Noah's Ark, the movie, comes out in June on Paramount+. And then, as a quick reminder, we do have a Substack newsletter where we post behind-the-scenes moments and pictures, and also where it turns out a lot of our listeners, like you, like to leave recommendations for future guests. We do love that, so please keep it up. There is a link in the show notes if you do want to sign up. It is free, but yes, there is also a paid subscription option if you want to support the work we do here. So if you are able, your support can ensure that we can continue to record these stories and, most importantly, Your support ensures that they can continue to be free for everyone. So thank you so much to everyone who has chipped in, and paid subscription or not, I hope you do sign up. Once again, there's a link to that in our show notes, and if you do need it, the link is lgbtqpod.substack.subscribe. All right, thank you so much for signing up, for listening. I'm Jeffrey Masters. I hope you have a great and safe Pride. Bye.